So now we will start with the remaining articles that we have. In last class, we discussed till Article 22. So today we will start with right against exploitation, Articles 23 and 24. So last time I told you regarding that DK Basu case that like I did not give you the proper writing. So I will just put it here. Like when I share this sheet with you today, I will put the case and whatever guidelines were given in that particular case, I will give that. So that is not like something to discuss or anything like that. It basically is giving certain guidelines, rights of prisoners that they have. Okay. So now next right that we have is what? It is right against exploitation. So this exploitation may be in any form or any type of exploitation, and regarding this we have two different articles. First article that we have is prohibition of traffic in human beings and forced labor. So this Article 23 that is providing us a right that or providing us, like a fundamental right that there should be prohibition on trafficking in human beings and their forced labor in any form should be stopped. So traffic in human beings, beggar and other similar types of forced labor like slavery or bonded labor, whatever types of forced labor were existing, those should be completely stopped. And what happens is that we should have separate legislations providing for criminal consequences for such type of offenses. So Article 23 is basically saying that any type of forced labor, traffic, and all of those things would be what? Those should be considered as punishable offense accordance with law. But now this particular law, what happens is that these laws would be made by Parliament, providing for specific provisions regarding any such type of like offense. So we have Immoral Traffic Prevention Act 1956, under which what happens is that it provides for specific provisions regarding trafficking in human being. We again have Bonded Labor System Abolition Act 1976, under which we are having special provisions regarding prohibition of bonded labor. So generally what happens when we see these types of acts, what we see is that these acts would be applicable when, for example, today a particular thing is made a crime, right? For example, acid attack. Acid attack was not considered as an offense at one point of time, but later on it was considered as a separate offense. So now what happens is that the day when it is considered as a separate offense, higher punishment is provided for this act. Only from that particular day it would be applicable, right? For example, if it was made a punishable offense, for example, in 2014, before 2014, whatever crimes were committed regarding acid attack, those we cannot punish under this particular law, right? So this is the general rule that only after something is made an offense, after that someone commits the crime, then we can punish the person. But in case of bonded labor, what happens is that this act would be applicable for cases that took place before this particular year also. So that means even before 1976, if there was the practice of bonded labor that was continuing before 1976 only, this act says that after introduction of this act, that particular practice should be immediately stopped. If anyone is continuing with that practice, then what happens is that that person would be made liable under this particular act. That means this act is having retrospective effect. Even something which is continuing before 1976, to that also this act would be applicable, and it would make, it would lead to some criminal consequences for those cases also. So this act also says that if someone is not able to repay the amount that is being taken, even in that case, what happens is that you cannot continue with this bonded labor practice. So that will be waived off. So these are the legislations basically that we have under Article 23 that talks about offenses that are punishable according to law. And these are certain types of offenses relating to traffic in human beings, beggar, prostitution, slavery, or any other such type of forced labor that may be there. So there may be what certain types of compulsory services for which the state can, there should not be like any discriminations made based on religion, race, caste, class, or any of them. So anything in this article nothing in this article shall prevent the state from imposing compulsory service for public purposes, and in imposing such services to the state shall not make discrimination. For example, what happens is that certain type of professions, like for example manual scavengers, like cleaning of drains and all those things. So what happens is that it was considered that only Dalits are the group of person who should do this particular practice. So there should not be any discrimination like that people belonging to this particular like community or caste are supposed to do this type of job only. They cannot take education, they cannot sit with other people or anything like that. So certain things may be like necessary for public purposes. For example, we may prevent bonded labor, slavery, or certain other things, but some professions might be necessary. And for those professions, what happens is that there should not be any we cannot specify that this particular job would be done by only these particular persons or group of persons. So this is what Article 23 is all about regarding prohibition of traffic in human beings and forced labor. So you can just remember traffic in human being and forced labor. So if you remember this particular thing, that is only enough for you to write any answer. Now, next article that we have under exploitation is Article 24. So what is Article 24? Article 24 says, so Article 24 is regarding prohibition of employment of children in factories, etc. So this is regarding prohibition of child labor. It says no child below the age of 14 years. So now in Indian law, the age of majority is 18 years, right? But in this particular case, what happens? It is considered that 14 years of age child, right? Below 14 years of child, they should not be employed to work in any factory or mine or engage in any hazardous employment. So below 14 years of age, they should not be employed. So if someone is employing, that person will have to face the legal consequences, right? So child labor is prohibited. Any person employing child in their dhabas or any other factories or anything, those persons will have to face the legal consequences for it. Because obviously children do not know that there is a law that they should not work until 14 years. They should rather go for free and compulsory primary education, right? So children are not having that knowledge. So the responsibility is imposed on whom? The responsibility is imposed on those persons who are employing children in such practices. So it also mentions any hazardous employment. So now what is hazardous employment? It may be working in some factories or in some industries where the environment is not that good for children. For example, working in a certain chemical manufacturing industry or something like that, where it will have adverse impact on the child. Maybe the child is doing some, like a very serious work, for which the child is not, like strong enough. Physically, he is not fit for that particular work. So all those things, anything that would have adverse effect on the child's health may be considered as hazardous employment under this. So no child under 14 years shall be employed to work in any factory, mine, or engaged in any other hazardous work. Again, to give power to this particular provision, what we need is that we need legislations, right? So we have the Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act of 1986. So under this particular act, employment of children in any work is considered like would lead to criminal consequences. But again, there are certain provisions. For example, a child is like under 14 years only. What happens is that a child is there. He is going for his education, primary compulsory education. But after returning from his school, what he is doing is that maybe some traditional skill, like some business is there that the family is running and the child is just helping them in that particular business. Those things may be considered. Why? Because it is within the family only, along with the family members. he is just providing some help, but he is not compromising with his free and compulsory primary education. So for this particular article, we have different laws or different guidelines also that are applicable regarding this, that punishment would be provided and all of that. We have child labor prohibition and regulation amendment rules are also there that would be applicable in this matter. So under this provision, yours is mentioned as 14. Why? Because until 14 years, what happens is that people should, or children should go for primary compulsory education that is provided under Article 21A, rather than going for work and working in any such industries, which is not good for the child's health or mental or physical health. Now next is prohibition of employment of children in factories. Okay, this one will end. So any questions on articles 23 and 24, rights against exploitation? Is it clear?
It's clear, ma'am.
Okay. So these are the two rights that we have under rights against exploitation. Next type of right that we have is right to freedom of relation. Now under this, what all articles we have? We have articles 25 to 28. So these are providing us certain types of rights with regard to freedom of relation. So it is because of these articles only, articles 25 to 28, that the word secularism was inserted in the preamble under the 42nd Amendment Act. Why? Because it was giving an idea that we do have certain fundamental rights that are giving us what? That are giving us freedom of religion. So it was because of that only that that particular word was inserted in preamble. Okay, now what are these articles that we have? Article 25 that talks about freedom of conscience and free profession, practice and propagation of religion. Again, these fundamental rights that we have, these are not like absolute rights. There may be certain restrictions. During time of emergency, definitely there are restrictions. Apart from emergency also, there might be certain other grounds based on which these fundamental rights may be restricted. So what are these? Firstly, it says subject to public order, morality and health and to other provisions of this part, all persons are equally entitled to freedom of conscience and they right freely to profess, practice and propagate religion. So in the name of practicing religion, what happens is that they cannot affect or they cannot hamper what? Public order, morality and health of the common people. So what happens, for example, there might be certain restrictions put on, for example, the Hindu festivals that we have, right? All the like Durga Puja and all. What happens is that water pollution is like it leads to water pollution. So there might be certain restrictions put by the government. Government might say that they cannot use, you know, like artificial products, plastics and all to make the idols or for the decoration and everything. It has to be made with something which is biodegradable or something like that. So in that case, what happens is that because for health reasons, there are certain restrictions that are put on this particular right that we have. That means we are anyways free to practice, profess, propagate a religion. We are free to celebrate our festivals and everything, but we should follow the guidelines in order to ensure that others are not suffering because of us. For example, regarding public order also, if there are any festivals, religious functions are there, what happens is that they need to take permission from the DC or other authorities before conducting it or before starting the preparation. Why? Because they also will have to talk to the police stations and then get help from those people. Why? Because so that it is not affecting others, it is not affecting public order or any other thing. So there might be these grounds based on which it may be restricted, but otherwise we are having this particular right. So next it is saying that we are been given this particular right to religion on these grounds, like subject to these grounds, but it says that nothing in this article shall affect the operation of any law or prevent the state from making any law regarding what, regulating or restricting economic, financial, political or other secular activities, religious practices, welfare and reforms, etc. So that means what, we are being given this right, and these three like grounds are also mentioned based on which it may be restricted. But it says that it is not restricting the power of the state. That means state is still free to make certain new laws, new guidelines, new schemes, etc., in order to, what happens is that, regulating and restricting economic, financial and other activities of the state. So that means even apart from these grounds, state is again free to make certain new guidelines, reforms and etc. And it basically says that carrying of kirpans are considered as Sikh religion. So there might be other laws. For example, under Motor Vehicles Act, all the other people are, like will have to wear helmets. But for Sikh people, there might be a certain type of a relaxation given. So this is what they are saying basically. And also Hindus would include Sikh, Jain, Buddhist, etc. also. So this is what Article 25 is all about. Even though we are given the right to freely profess, practice and propagate any religion of our choice, there might be restrictions based on public order, morality and health. And the state is also free to make certain new guidelines, new restrictions, etc. if it is needed. Maybe previously it was not like a, previously it was not there that all the ideals and decoration and everything has to be made with something which is biodegradable. Today it is preferred. Maybe tomorrow it would be made a compulsion that everyone will have to use those type of materials only. So there might be new laws that may also be introduced under it. Next right that we have is under Article 26. It is freedom to manage religious affairs. Again, it mentions the same grounds that subject to public order, morality and health, every religious denomination or any section thereof shall have the right. Now what happens, for example, we are given this right that we are free to practice, propagate, profess any religion of our choice. But there would be what? There would be certain types of religious affairs in all the religions. So to manage those religious affairs also, we should be given certain rights or we should be given certain freedoms so that we can do all the things that are needed to practice our religion. For example, there might be some pujas that we need to do. There might be some festivals that we need to celebrate. So for that, what happens is that we should be given some freedoms so that we are able to manage those religious affairs ourselves. So what freedoms we are given? To establish and maintain institutions. So we are given this right to, or freedom to establish and maintain institutions that may be needed to manage its own affairs in the matters of religion, own and acquire movable and immovable property, administer such property. Now what happens? For example, we are told that you are free to practice any religion of your choice. We want to practice Hindu religion. So what happens? We would need certain temples for that, right? We would need certain maybe community halls or something like that, where we can uh, freely conduct all the religious affairs. For that, what happens? We would need certain types of freedoms. Freedoms like we want to establish and maintain certain institutions. Maybe we want to establish some community halls. Maybe there would be a small library also that would contain some religious books and all. We also want to manage our own affairs. We want to acquire movable and immovable property. So there might be donations coming from people. There might be people donating books also, might be people donating plots of land also. And what happens is that we should be free to administer those properties, etc. That means that particular trust or temple or whatever it is, that should have those types of rights. So these are some of the rights or freedoms that we need in order to be able to freely manage these religious affairs, so that we are free to conduct all the things that are needed for our religion. It's clear, right? These two rights that we have.
Yes, ma'am.
The same like restrictions are mentioned: public order, morality, and health. And based on that, firstly, we are said that we are free to practice, profess, propagate any religion, but these should not be hampered. Others should not face any type of like adverse consequences because of this. And also, state is free to make certain laws, regulations, etc. And secondly, it says to be able to enjoy this right properly, we are given certain freedoms so that we are free to manage these religious affairs. What are these freedoms? Establish and maintain institutions. We are free to establish any trust, get it registered, acquire property in its name, open a bank account in name of that particular trust, and open other bodies like a library, maybe some other clubs or meeting halls or certain other things. So these are the freedoms that are given under Article 26, just to ensure that we are able to enjoy this right in a better way. Next right that we have is freedom as to payment of taxes for promotion of any particular religion. No person shall be compelled to pay any taxes, and proceeds of which specifically appropriated the payment of expenses, promotion of. Now what happens is that it is said that India is a secular country. We are not having any religion of the state, right? We are free to practice, profess, propagate any religion. So it says that there should not be any type of compulsion on any person to pay taxes that would be used for advancement or maintenance of any particular religion or religious denomination. That means there should not be any type of taxes that are compulsorily imposed on any person, and that would go for betterment of any particular religion or religious activities. If someone is willing to practice, propagate, profess any religion, he is free to do that. If someone wants to donate for any religious activities of a certain religion, he is free to do that. But there should not be any type of compulsion in terms of taxes that is like issued by government or that is issued by the state. So there should not be any type of compulsion on that. So freedom as to payment of taxes for promotion of any particular religion. Regarding promotion of any particular religion, state cannot compel any person to pay taxes. Next is Article 28. It talks about freedom as to attendance at religious institution or religious worship in certain educational institution. No religious institution shall be provided in any educational institution wholly maintained out of state funds. Now what happens? There might be some government schools that are wholly maintained out of state funds. But if the principal is of a certain religion, the principal is not having the authority. That principal would start giving some sort of religious instructions of his or her religion to the students. Why? Because it is a school that is maintained out of state funds. So there is a restriction that such educational institutions will not provide any type of religious instructions to their students. The students are also free to practice whatever religion they want outside the school. So it is applicable to schools that are maintained wholly out of state fund. So this particular provision will not apply to an educational institution which is administered by state but has been established under endowment or trust, which requires that religious instructions shall be imparted in such institution. Now for this particular thing, what it is completely maintained out of state funds, right? That means it is a completely government school where there is a restriction that you cannot provide any sort of religious instructions to the students. But this particular provision will not be applicable where if there is an educational institution, if there is a school which is established by some endowment or trust. For example, there is Tamil Nadu Endowment Board, Kerala Endowment Board. If those bodies are establishing a certain school, or if any particular trust is establishing a school, they are free to provide such instructions. Why? Because it may be necessary for advancement of a certain religion, and it is not maintained by state fund, right? It is maintained by that particular body or that particular trust only. So they are maintaining it out of their donations or out of whatever money they have. So these are free to provide any sort of religious instructions in their schools. No person attending any educational institution recognized by state and receiving shall require to take part in any religious instructions that may be imparted in such institution, or to attend religious worships that may be conducted in such institution or in premises attached, unless under such person, or if the person is minor, his guardian gives consent. So what happens now, there might be some institutions which are may not be wholly maintained by state fund, but they are also receiving funds from the state. So what they are doing is that as a part of their curriculum maybe, or as a part of some co-curricular activities, what they are doing is that they are also providing some sort of religious instructions. In that case, what happens is that students attending that particular school, they are not under compulsion to attend such instructions. Is this part clear? So firstly, what happens if there is a school which is wholly maintained by state fund, that means it is a completely government school receiving 100% of the funds from state only, and they are running it. They cannot provide any religious instructions. But if any school is there which is run and established by some endowment board or trust, they are free to provide religious instruction. There might be a school which is receiving some amount of funds from the state, and they are providing some sort of religious instructions to the students. So in this particular case, what happens is that school is free to provide religious instructions, but students are not bound to attend those religious instructions. That means, for example, as a part of their prayer, if they are like providing some prayer of a certain religion, that means students from other religions or students who are not interested, they cannot be compelled to attend for that particular prayer. Students are free to take the decision on their own. And if student is minor, then his guardian will take the decision. If guardian wants, then they can say that, okay, fine, my child will attend this particular religious prayer. I don't have any problem. So in such cases, what happens is that government can put a restriction that you cannot make your students compulsorily attend a certain type of religious instruction that you are providing within your premises. So it may be a prayer before starting of the school, or it may be certain other activities. For example, there is a school who is also allowing some people from a religion to conduct some type of religious festivals. For example, there is a school, they are having a big playground. So what they are doing is that they are allowing the nearby people to conduct some sort of festival, some pujas, etc. So the school authorities cannot compel all the students to attend that particular puja if students are not willing to, or if their guardians are not willing to. So this is what is freedom as to attendance at religious instruction or religious worship in certain educational institution is. Firstly, it says schools receiving funds completely from state fund, they cannot perform any sort of religious instruction. Schools established and maintained by endowment or trust, they can provide religious instructions. And thirdly, schools that are taking some amount of fund from state, what happens is that those schools can provide religious instructions, but it cannot be made a part of compulsion, it cannot be given to students as a compulsion. It depends on the student or the parents of the student whether they want to take part in that particular religious activity or not. So this is all about the right to freedom of religion. Is this part clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So these are the three rights that we have regarding freedom to practice, propagate, profess any religion, freedom to manage religious affairs. So this particular right is given to whom? This right is given to individuals like us, that we are free to take part in any sort of festivals, any activities or any other things, right? So Article 25 is given to individuals to practice, propagate, profess religion. But this particular right is given not to individuals, but to institutions or bodies. Why? Because institutions
Okay.
like trust, endowment boards, etc., they can, like hold property, self-registered, manage their own affairs, administer their own things. So this is given to individuals. Article 26 is given to bodies. Next is Article 27, that state cannot make it a compulsion, like compulsorily take taxes from people for advancement of a certain religion. So that cannot be done. And under Article 21, there are three things. Institutions receiving funds completely from state, they cannot provide religious instruction. Institutions established under endowment board, trust, etc., they can provide. And other institutions receiving some funds from state, they can provide, but that should not be a compulsory type of practice for the student. It depends on the student and his guardian whether they want to take part in that or not.
Ma'am, can you please repeat Article 28, subclause 2 again, ma'am? 2, ma'am.
Subclause 2, okay. So this basically means that, so see, firstly, we are being told that no religious instruction will be provided in a school which is maintained out of state fund, right? That means completely government
Okay.
cannot provide any type of religious instruction. But secondly, what it says that even though this is provided, there might be certain institutions established by endowment boards are there, right? Tamil Nadu Endowment Board, Kerala Endowment Board. There might be certain trusts who are maintaining some temples also. They might also open some schools to provide religious instructions. So this restriction will not be applicable to these schools established by endowment boards and trusts, and they can freely provide some type of, like religious instructions and all to their students. So they are not restricted from this particular thing. So
Okay.
we can infer from here also. Here the institutions or bodies are given these freedoms, right? That they can manage their own affairs, administer such properties, establish or maintain institutions.
Okay.
So under this only, a certain temple, maybe a trust is there that has opened a temple. They can also open an institutions where they would provide religious instructions apart from the normal education that would be provided. So this, right, this is like related only, these two things.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so the next right that we have is cultural and educational rights. Again, there are only two articles are there. So first,
Okay.
protection of interest of minorities, and second one is right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. So in the previous one also, there was a right to establish institutions that provide religious instructions, etc. But this was regarding religion, like religion specific, right? But this is minorities. For minorities only, these rights are applicable. So first is saying protection
Okay.
of interest of minorities. This interest, it may not be only in terms of education, but in terms of advancement of their, like that particular tribe, culture, whatever it is. So there are two clauses. First is any section of the citizens residing in territory of India or any part thereof having any distinct language, script or culture of its own shall have a right to conserve the same. Now there are certain reports also that comes every now and then, right? That these religions are endangered, languages are endangered languages. Only like 5 people are speaking this particular language, only 6 people are speaking this particular language. So like that, what happens is that certain reports also come showing how endangered a particular language is. So what happens is that any section of citizens residing in the territory, not specific to any religion or any group of people residing within India, who are having what? Who are having a distinct language of their own, their script, their culture, etc., will have right to conserve the same. That means it is also a fundamental right to conserve our language, script, or culture that we have as a community, as a tribe, as a people belonging from any certain group. So this is a right that we are being given. And for this, what we can do, for example, for preservation of this particular language, what we can do, maybe we can establish a small institution where like that particular language would be taught to anyone interested, or maybe small kids. We can try to teach people that particular script, or maybe we can conduct activities for advancement of the culture and for better knowledge of people regarding these things. And secondly, no citizen shall be denied admission to any educational institution maintained by the state government on the grounds of. Again, it is saying that whatever education institutions are maintained by state, those institutions, what happens is that are open for all the people. There should not be any discrimination regarding admission or getting education in those institutions, any grounds like religion, race, caste, language, or any of them. So institutions maintained by the state government would be free and open to all the people, and there should not be any discrimination, even though it is people from a minority community, minority group, or whatever it is. So this is regarding protection of interest of minorities. They should be getting education, free and compulsory education, that is mentioned under part 3, and also they should be given the right or freedom to protect their language, script, culture, and for that whatever they need to do, they are free to do or conduct those activities.
Ma'am, I have a doubt, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, and then when the schools, they have been clearly saying that no, their Brahmin category will get more seats than the Lingayat category or any other such things like that, ma'am. Are they not violating this article, ma'am, then?
So again, we have read another provisions we have that based on this grounds, there might be reservations and all. Like under article,
yes, ma'am.
If you see what is equality, everyone should be treated equal, but on the basis
Yes, ma'am.
of these grounds, there may be certain reservations. So even though it is said that there are there should not be any restrictions, but again, we should be following the reservation policies also. After following the reservation policy, whatever seats are left, there should not be any discriminations on that. That should be open on the basis of merit or whatever it is.
Ma'am, but these things happen in general category also, ma'am. So like a Brahmin school will give admission to Brahmin students only. So is that not violating the article?
No, see, Brahmin schools should come under this particular thing. So Brahmin schools should come under this. For example, there is certain trust that is maintaining a temple of Brahmins, or certain, like body of community hall of Brahmins, and they have also established a school under this particular right, that they have this right to establish and maintain institutions. So what they can do for establishing that, again, what they can do is that because it is established under some trust, they can provide some instructions also, religious instructions like teaching Vedas and all of that. And also what happens is that because it is not an institution which is completely run by state, right? Those institutions would be either established under some trust or other bodies only, not like state government ones. So there can be restrictions that Brahmin students only can, like get admitted. They would be getting preferences or any other things. But this is only institutions that are maintained by state or receiving aid out of state funds only. Like schools that we see basically.
Yes, ma'am.
So for example, like that, we even see that missionary schools, there might be certain reservation for Christians. There might be some madrasa schools, right? High madrasa. So there also religious instructions are given. So those are not like proper the government schools that we see. So it would be those only.
Okay.
Next is right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. So the first right that we have is in general, protecting interest of minorities. It means in terms of getting education, protecting their language, script, culture, and other matters. But this is specifically regarding their like right to establish and administer educational institutions. So what is this? All minorities, whether based on religious, language, etc., shall have. So minorities, no matter whether it is a linguistic minority or a religious minority, they will have the right to establish and also administer educational institutions of their choice. So for example, the high madrasa schools that we see, they can say that we are a minority based on religion. So we need to establish and administer educational institutions of our choice. So they are neither following the CBSE board nor the state boards, but they would have their own pattern of conducting exam and all of that. So what happens is that it would come under this, that minorities, whether it is a religious or linguistic minority, they will have this particular right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. And also what happens for establishment or maintenance of those schools, they are also been given the right to acquire property, and they can acquire property in the name of that trust or body, and also they can establish institutions, run those institutions, and provide the type of education that they want to provide. And also what happens is that there should not be any sort of discrimination in terms of giving or granting aids to such institutions. So if government is providing, government has decided that, okay, fine, for this particular financial year, we are having 400, for example, we are having 40 crore rupees for betterment of educational institutions like primary schools. So what happens if that particular amount of 40 crore is distributed amongst primary schools, that there should not be any discrimination. Even government should consider these schools that are administered or established by minority groups. So if government is providing that particular aid to a certain type of schools, even a minority school fulfilling those grounds would be entitled to get that particular fund. So there should not be any discrimination made by government, because this is a right that is given under Constitution itself, that they would be having this right to establish, administer educational institutions of their choice. Is this part clear? Cultural and educational rights?
Yes, ma'am.
So only two rights we have, 29 and 30. 29 is in general, whatever is needed. For example, education, then protecting language, script, culture, whatever is needed, everything is included. Article 30 is only in terms of education, and it is saying that whether it is a religious minority or a linguistic minority, they will be free to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. They can acquire property for the same, and state shall not discriminate in providing grants for betterment of those educational institutions as well. So they should also be treated like any other educational institutions in the same category. So after all the rights, the next right that we have is right to constitutional remedy. So only there is one article, it is Article 32. So this right is also called as like heart and soul of the Constitution. Why it is heart and soul of the Constitution? Because fundamental rights are like so important under Constitution, right? If this particular
Yes, ma'am.
not there, we cannot even enjoy these fundamental rights. So it is only Article 32 that is giving a guarantee that we are entitled and we will be free to enjoy these rights. These are like guaranteed rights. No one can take this away from us. So right to constitutional remedies is also considered as the heart and soul of the Constitution. What is this right? It says right to move to the Supreme Court by appropriate proceedings for the enforcement of rights conferred by this part guaranteed. The Supreme Court shall have the power to issue directions or orders or writs, including the writ in the nature of this, whichever is appropriate for enforcement of this right. So firstly, it is saying that whatever rights are given under Part 3, these rights are guaranteed to the people. It may be citizens, it may be all individuals also, because some rights are available to citizens, some are available to all the people, even to foreigners. So this particular right under Article 32 is giving a guarantee that whatever fundamental rights are provided, Supreme Court will do what? Supreme Court will like enforce these rights in case they are violated. So Supreme Court is like the guarantor or the protector of these fundamental rights that we have seen, all the 5 different categories of fundamental rights. It is the Supreme Court who would be guaranteeing or protecting these fundamental rights. How Supreme Court will protect or guarantee these rights? It will be in the nature of these 5 different types of writs. And how Supreme Court will do that? It may be in nature of any of these writs. Supreme Court will provide a direction or an order and will enforce that particular right, whatever is necessary based on the situation. So Supreme Court can enforce whatever right is whatever writ is applicable, and based on that it may issue a direction or it may pass an order for enforcement of the fundamental right that we have. So again, this is giving like some powers to the parliament, that it can also empower any other court to exercise some, like some things within the local limits of its jurisdiction. For example, in general, all the rights are protected by Supreme Court. But if the parliament decides to pass a certain legislation for any of the rights, parliament can do what? It can also mention any other court that can exercise these, rights. For example, under Article 21A, right to free and compulsory education is provided. That means it is what? It is a fundamental right. For violation of that, we can go to the Supreme Court. But again, we have a different legislation for that, right? Right of children for primary and compulsory education. Under that act, what happens is that a different court would be mentioned that will have jurisdiction for matters arising under that particular statute. So this is what is mentioned here, that Parliament is still having the right that they can make certain laws and also specify which court would be having jurisdiction in matters relating to that particular legislation. And lastly, it is saying that the right guaranteed by this article shall not be suspended except as otherwise provided by this constitution. So Parliament is not having the power to, delete any of these rights that are, any of these writs that are provided under this article. So is Article 32 clear? The clauses?
Can you please repeat subclause 3, ma'am, again?
Okay. So under first one, what it says that the Supreme Court is the one which is guaranteeing all the fundamental rights that we have. That means Supreme Court is the only one which will protect all the 5 different types of fundamental rights that we saw. Secondly, it says that Supreme Court will, how it will protect? It will protect it by way of these 5 different types of writs. Now that is clear that Supreme Court is the only one which will protect the fundamental rights. But what we saw while reading the fundamental rights, that for certain fundamental rights, we are having different legislations also. For example, under Article 21A or some other articles also, we can take an example. For example, this particular only we will take. Article 23 says protection of traffic in human beings and forced labor. That means it is a fundamental right. For violation, we can approach the Supreme Court. But Parliament has done what? In order to provide specific provision, Parliament has also passed the legislation. It is the Bonded Labor System Abolition Act. So in this particular act, what happens? For the violations, the act will not mention that you can directly go to Supreme Court. Under this act, where we can go, it may be some magistrate court or some other court, whatever court is mentioned under that particular legislation. So this is what is saying, that under these specific legislations that we have under all the articles, the court, different courts name may be mentioned by the Parliament. It may not be the Supreme Court, but different other courts name may also be mentioned. So this particular thing under Article 32, it basically means in general it is the Supreme Court where we can go for enforcement of the right. So if we are filing a case under any of these writs, we can directly go to Supreme Court. But if we are filing a case for violation of any of the provisions of a certain legislation, we cannot go to the Supreme Court. That case has to be in form of writ only, right? If we are filing a case for specific violation of that legislation, we will have to go to that specific court which is mentioned by Parliament. So if we want to go to Supreme Court, we will go in term like filing a writ only, we will go to the Supreme Court. But there may be other courts which may be mentioned by the Parliament in other laws that are made by the Parliament. So this is clear, right? Anyways, the right is still a fundamental right. We are free to go to the Supreme Court with any of these writs, but there is also legislation under which also we can file a court case to a separate court which is mentioned under that particular legislation. Is this clear? Third one. So this one, this is not like limiting our power or right to go to Supreme Court. We are still free to go, but there may be other court also, which may be having the power to provide an order on that particular matter. So next that we have is we need to know the different types of writs that are provided under the Constitution of India. So now what are writs? Writs are basically a certain type of order or a direction of the court. Now the court may pass an order or it may pass a direction and for the enforcement of our fundamental rights that we have. So we have 5 different types of writs and we should know meanings of each of these different writs that we have. First writ that we have is habeas corpus. Habeas corpus means to have the body. So when habeas corpus may be used, the writ of habeas corpus?
When a person is arrested, ma'am.
Yeah, when a person is arrested. So under Article 21, what right we have? We have the right that no person shall be deprived of his right to life and personal liberty. So we are having this right to life and personal liberty. But again, there is a limitation, except according to procedure established by law. That means a person, if he has committed an offense, the person may be arrested, the case may be filed against the person and all of that. But what happens, it should be according to a procedure established by law only. If a person is arrested without following the due process that we need, or by violating some legal laws or anything like that, then the person can file a case of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus means to have the body. So a writ of habeas corpus means that the court would order. So this is in form of a court's order that the arrested person should be presented before it. It can also order to set free an arrested person if the manner or grounds of arrest are not lawful or satisfactory. So that means we are having a right to life and personal liberty, but we may be arrested or this right may be taken away from us, but it should be according to procedure established by law. If procedure established by law is not followed, then court can pass an order by way of habeas corpus for like presentation of the body or to set a person. What happens, for example, a person is been arrested on a certain thing, okay? There is a ground that the person should be informed about the reasons for arrest, what offense he has committed, what all things are there. A person has been simply arrested without having any proof or anything, without having an arrest warrant or other things. So in such cases, court can make an order that tell us on what grounds, what reasons you have arrested this person. If court is not satisfied with the reasons, court may even pass an order that you should release this particular person. You cannot detain this particular person for any longer. For example, under the preventive detention laws, there is a like limitation that for 6 months only you can detain a person. After that, you need to take special permission. If you are not taking special permission also, and if you are like keeping the person detained for a longer than 6 months, if someone files a case under habeas corpus, court may say that the grounds based on which the person is detained is not satisfactory, so you cannot detain the person any longer. So this is what is habeas corpus. Whenever the grounds are not satisfactory, whenever the due process is not been followed, it is the right of the court. So court can see whether everything is proper and clear or not. If not, court can make an order that you should release this particular person, or you cannot detain this particular person for any longer time. Is this clear? Habeas corpus?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Next is mandamus. So mandamus means what? Mandamus means to command. So you can just try to remember this word. It would just give you an idea on what type of writ this is. So what happens in case of mandamus? If an executive body fails to perform or violates any constitutionally mandated duty, a writ of mandamus can be filed. So what is mandamus? For example, there are some executive bodies are there, right? Some government offices are there, and they are certain different. For example, all the different offices, for example, the UGC, then some other bodies, if you see. For example, High Court, okay? What happens is that High Court has, issued a notification regarding judiciary. High Court has issued a notification regarding judiciary, and where what happens is that the reservation policy that they have mentioned is not, properly following whatever should be followed, right? The reservation policy is somewhat not according to the guidelines. So what happens? A person files an RTI. A person wants to know that based on what guidelines you have mentioned these reservation policies, a person files an RTI, but High Court refuses to reply. So in this particular case, what happens is that the person can file a mandamus, writ of mandamus, wherein the High Court would be, would be asked to show the reasons for why it has failed to provide the information that was been requested. So basically the High Court was having a duty to disclose the grounds or the guidelines that were followed for that particular reservation policy. But High Court failed to disclose those reasons. So in that case, a person can file a case of mandamus. For example, that RTI was filed regarding Modi's qualification, right? But what happened? Information was not provided by Delhi University. Information was not provided by Delhi University. What they said is that, yeah, he has completed his course from our university, but we cannot provide you any other, documents or any other proofs, etc. For example, recently regarding that PM Cares fund also, what happened is that RTI was rejected, right? That we cannot provide you those information. So in such cases, what happens? Those bodies are having a duty to disclose the information to us, but they fail to disclose that information. So if we are moving to the courts, we can file a case of mandamus, and then we can try to enforce these rights that we are being guaranteed. For example, a person applies for a passport, his form is correct and everything is correct, but he is not been issued that particular passport. He can file a case of mandamus that I had this particular right, my right has been violated. Why that particular person or official is not fulfilling his duty. I applied for a driving license in RTO office. It is not issuing that particular driving license, though all the forms and documents and everything was just not doing it. For example, that Bangalore Water Supply and Sewage Board, it is providing a very, it is charging more for water bill or not providing water to us. We can ask the reasons why it has been done. So in mandamus, what happens? It is like a command where an executive body fails to perform or violates any constitutionally mandated duty, then this particular writ may be issued. This writ may be used. So whenever any particular body or any other things, executive department has failed to perform a duty, then in such case we can use this particular writ for enforcement of that right. but this duty has to be a public duty, and it has to be like a duty attached to that particular body. So it has to be a duty attached with the High Court. So in case a driving license is not issued by an RTO office, we cannot file a case for that against the passport office, right? It has to be the right department also who is having a public duty and who has violated that particular duty. We applied for the passport, but they failed to provide us the passport. So that is failure to fulfill their particular constitutionally mandated duty. Is this part clear? Habeas corpus and mandamus?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so writs are very clear. If anyone is having any confusion, you can ask. Habeas corpus is to have the body, court can pass an order that bring this particular person before us and let us know why you have arrested this person or why you have detained the person. If court is not satisfied with the grounds, court can also pass an order that you should release this particular person. In mandamus, it is like a command where a constitutionally mandated duty or a public duty is not fulfilled by an executive body. So court will pass an order that you should follow this duty or fulfill this duty because it is your duty that you have failed to fulfill. So this is what mandamus is. Next is prohibition. So prohibition, from the name itself, it is very clear, right? Prohibiting. So it means to prevent or to stop. What is prohibition? It is this right is issued by a higher court. It may be High Court or Supreme Court when a lower court has considered a case going beyond its jurisdiction or by violating the provisions of natural justice. So prohibition can be issued in two cases. It may be when a court is like going beyond its jurisdiction or when natural justice is violated. For example, there is a for example, there is a property matter, okay, property dispute. So which court will have jurisdiction for this property dispute?
Civils, ma'am.
Yeah, it would be the civil court who will have jurisdiction regarding this particular property dispute. But what happened is that, for example, some magistrate court is taking, dealing with this particular matter, which is not having the jurisdiction, right jurisdiction to decide or to, deal with this particular matter. So what the court can do is that court can pass an order to this particular court saying that, you provide us all the documents and everything relating to the case. Then the court would see, higher courts would see, and if it feels that the court is not having its jurisdiction, higher court would pass an order that you should stop deciding on this particular matter because you are going beyond your jurisdiction. You are not even having jurisdiction to decide on this particular case or matter. So you should stop on deciding this particular matter. So it may be regarding going beyond its jurisdiction. It may be, for example, a matter arising in Bangalore. Okay, a dispute arised in Bangalore. Both the persons are from here only, from Karnataka. But what they did is that one person filed a case in Punjab. Now what happens? Punjab court will not have jurisdiction on this particular matter. So in such case also court can say that you are not having jurisdiction for this particular case. It is the Bangalore court only that is having jurisdiction. So when a lower court is going beyond its jurisdiction, then a writ of prohibition can be issued, and by this writ, the higher courts would ask that particular lower court to stop taking decisions on that particular case or, dealing with that particular matter or case. Or what happens is that it may be for violation of the principles or the provisions of natural justice also. So this particular writ may also be issued in such cases. For example, there is no fair hearing, both the sides are not being heard and all other things. In such matters also, the higher court may, use this particular writ to stop or prevent the lower court from deciding on that particular matter. So here both the sides, no one to judge their own case and reason decision. If any of these grounds are violated, then also this particular writ may be issued. For example, a court has passed an order without mentioning any reasons or any other things on that particular thing. So the higher court may say that whatever decision you have given, it is not a fair judgment and it is not following the principles of natural justice. You have not justified your reason. So what happens is that it may consider that particular order as invalid, right? Question of order. So that particular power is given under prohibition to prevent that particular to prevent or on this particular matter, that what it can do is that it can prevent a court from any other taking a matter. So this is clear, right? Prohibition means to stop or to prevent. So Supreme Court or the High Courts, what it can do is that if a court is going beyond their jurisdiction or not following the provisions of natural justice, what it can do is that it can ask that particular lower court to stop deciding on that particular matter or that particular case. So next is certiorari, to be certified or to be informed. So in this particular case, it is like prohibition, prohibiting or stopping the court from continuing with that matter. And in this case, what happens? So the main difference between these two is, this is when the matter is still being decided by the court. That means lower court has not yet passed an order. They are still deciding on it. And certiorari would be when the matter is already been decided. Then certiorari would be applied. So this is to be certified or to be informed. When it would be applied, it would be issued by higher court to a lower court to quash the order of the lower court. So because order is already been passed, but what happens is that it was not by following the principles of natural justice or according to the provisions of law. So in such cases, what happens is that higher courts would consider that particular order as invalid. For example, a matter was decided by a court which was not having jurisdiction to decide on the matter. So later on, that order would be considered as invalid by a higher court. If a matter was decided by not following the principles of natural justice, then also this particular writ may be issued. So the grounds are same. Main difference is, this is when the matter is still been decided. So it would be to prevent or stop the court. But this is when the matter is already been decided. So what option we are left with? We are just left with one option, that we will not follow that particular order. So higher court would say that this particular order is not valid. Is this clear? Any confusion on these writs?
No, ma'am. Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, the writ of prohibition, beside that we can, in the usual practice ways, they use rejection of plaint also, no, ma'am?
What?
The rejection of plaint is also used in such cases, no, ma'am, because prohibition is almost showing the similarities of rejection of plaint, ma'am.
When the court itself.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so that is when the court knows that, okay, fine, maybe the lawyer has filed a case, but what happens is that the matter or the cause of action is not sufficient for us to take action, or maybe we are not jurisdiction. So in that case, what happens? The court itself knows that we are not having jurisdiction. So the court straight away rejects it. But
yes, ma'am,
applicable when if the court is not knowing and they are just continuing with that particular case.
But that usually doesn't happen, no, ma'am.
Yeah,
usually
doesn't
the court
happen.
will observe one or the other.
Yes, yeah. That jurisdiction thing generally does not happen, but it may be some where the natural justice is not followed, or the provision is there in case anything goes wrong. Then this particular be applied. Obviously, courts would always see that whether all the things are there or not and everything. Then only they would take.
Yes, ma'am.
So the main difference would be, here the matter is already been continuing, and here it is already been decided. Habeas corpus is to bring the body in case a person has been arrested or detained. Court can ask for the reasons or grounds for arrest, And also court can pass an order for release of the person. In mandamus, it is like a command given by court to perform a constitutionally mandated or a public duty. Next one that we have is quo warranto, by what authority? So it is like in the form of a question that quo warranto, what is your authority? So this may be exercised, for example, any executive officer, right? For any particular body, for example, there is a person who is working as an officer with the income tax department, but what happens is that the person is not having the required qualification. So in that particular person, a writ of quo warranto may be like filed, asking that particular person, ki, what is your authority that you are holding this particular position? You are not having the required qualification, so what is your authority? So like that, this particular writ may be issued. What is your authority? Or if a particular office or department has passed an order, then also it may be issues that by what authority you have passed this particular order or particular notification or whatever it may be. So quo warranto would be basically in the form of a question asking what is your authority or under what reasons you are holding this particular position, you have taken this particular decision, you have passed this order, or any other things. So these are the 5 different writs that we have. Now, regarding fundamental rights, what we have seen is that some fundamental rights are available only to citizens and some are available to all people. It may be citizens, it may be non-citizens also. Both would be entitled to some type of writs, some type of fundamental rights. So these are some of the fundamental rights which are available only to citizens, like 15, 16, 19, 29, 30. And these are some of the rights which are available to both citizens as well as non-citizens also, like 14, 21, etc. So there was a lot of, like confusion whether Article 32 is applicable to citizens or is it applicable to both. So what is your opinion? Is Article 32 available to all the citizens or is it available only to like citizens of India or to foreigners also? Anyone? Article 32, is it available only to citizens or foreigners as well?
Ma'am, only to citizens of India, ma'am.
So what happens is that now it is said that, for example, these fundamental rights are given even to foreigners. Now for these fundamental rights, if foreigners are not given the right to file a case, what happens is that it will have no meaning. So it is said that whatever fundamental rights are given to all, like foreigners as well as individual citizens, or these foreigners will also have right. But foreigners cannot file a writ for enforcement of these rights which are not given to them. But whatever is given to them, for that they can file a case, but not for this. For all the rights, citizens are the one who will have the constitutional remedies or the writs. So any doubts on this part? Like fundamental rights part is over. So any doubts on it? So we'll look at some of the questions on fundamental rights in next class, like basically from writs and all, it's little important. So we will look at some of the questions, how questions may be asked from writ part or other fundamental rights. So any doubts if you have from part 3, you can ask.
Are there any important citations with regard to these articles, ma'am?
These articles, so important ones I have already given, not like much.
But today, so far, we didn't see anything, ma'am.
Yeah,
so
today we have not discussed. So regarding this one, your right to relation, again, that SR Bommai and all that, so we will anyways discuss. Regarding emergency only we will discuss, so I did not include that.
Okay.
Yeah, Article 25. So these are, there are not much important things, but for religion, I just thought that Sarbom, I think we will anyways include later on, but I will just see if I get any one or two other important cases that maybe we can discuss that also.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, in exams, how many lines or pages they expect us to
How many?
fill in when it? I mean, how many lines or pages they expect us to fill in with the exam point of view with regard to cases, ma'am?
With regard to cases, so obviously as many cases as you can give, that is like that.
No, ma'am. One single case. I mean, how much of?
Okay, one
I mean,
single.
elaboration or something. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah. So see, again, that depends. For example, there may be a question on, for example, right to religion, right? It may be for a 5 marks question also, it may be 10 marks question also. So accordingly, that would depend. So maybe like in 2-3 lines, you should be able to, like give the main points or main things if it is a short question. Because like if you are providing, for example, 3 or 4 lines for each of the cases, maybe you can provide 2-3 cases also. So like that you can see.
Okay.
Yeah. Fine then. So we will continue with fundamental, DPSPs next class. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay then. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.